Show, the only true democracy in talk radio, of, for, and by you, the people. Live nationwide and streaming live at lesliemarshallshow.com. Call in with your thoughts at 888-6-LESLIE.
You're free. How you doing? Happy Tuesday. I'm Leslie Marshall. Welcome or welcome back. Only true democracy and talk. Thank you for listening to us on radio, on podcast, on stream. Thank you for watching us on iTunes. You don't watch us there, you listen to us there. Hello, I need more caffeine. On Twitter's Periscope, Facebook Live, LinkedIn Live, YouTube Live. And we are live, and joining us today live is Roy Houseman. Mr. Houseman is Legislative Director for the United Steelworkers. Now, he's been part of the Legislative and Policy Department since 2011, working on a broad range of issues, including trades and pensions. And before that, before he was in D.C., in our nation's capital, he worked at the former Smurfit Stone paper mill in Missoula, Montana. And he served as president of USW Local 885 there. Now, after a trade-related mill closure in 2010, he completed a Master's of Public Administration Assistance Benefits, degree from the University of Montana. He used trade adjustment assistance benefits. So his efforts on aiding steelworkers qualify for the trade adjustment benefits and qualified for over 10,000 union members. Did you hear that number? Over 10,000 union members across our country for work training. And because of those trade impacts. Now, he was last on the show in January. He gave a great interview. Hopefully it'll be great today. I know it will from him. Me, if I stop tripping over my tongue, maybe I need less caffeine today. We're excited to have him back. Mr. Houseman is back in the house. Thank you, Mr. Houseman, for joining us, and welcome back and taking the time today. We love having you. Thank you.
No, it's great. It's wonderful to be back and an opportunity to talk to you and your listeners.
Oh, no, absolutely. And our viewers, right? And
viewers, that's true.
And be sure, by the way, to check out when we're taking a break, even though you'll see us, you can take a little break and go to usw.org. That is the website for the USW. Also follow them on Twitter at Steelworkers and follow them at Roy Houseman, ROYHOUSEMAN. There is so much to be excited about in DC when it relates to infrastructure, because infrastructure is one of those areas that's a win-win, whether you're a Democrat or Republican, because it's a job creator. But in administrations, whether Democrat or Republican, in the White House, majority in the House of the Senate, infrastructure has been an issue where the can has been kicked down the road far too many times. And right now, under Joe Biden, there are a lot of people that are more optimistic that this can be done. And that Democrats and Republicans maybe aren't as far apart as one would think, and that we can have finally infrastructure which will definitely impact very favorably the American worker. So when President Biden unveiled his American Jobs Plan, what he did, in my understanding, is that he took an expansive view of infrastructure. And in looking at that, he could help address some of the most pressing problems facing the country. First of all, would you agree with that? And second of all, can you help us to understand some of those most pressing problems that face our nation with regard to infrastructure?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, this is one of the neat things about the American Jobs Plan is it's a recognition that the U.S. has not been spending enough on its infrastructure over the long term. So I used to be a city council member in Missoula, Montana, and I remember the public works person coming in and talking about the trees. They hadn't been trimmed or maintained in the city because the city didn't put money into trimming, maintaining those trees, so they ended up having to cut down a bunch of them. They called it deferred maintenance. And that's really what's happening right now. Is we have this amazing Eisenhower interstate highway system. We have one of the most productive freight rail systems in the world. But at the same time, we haven't been investing in the long term. It's kind of like we've been deferring, sitting on our laurels, so to speak, and allowing us, and not focusing on how to rebuild our bridges, upgrade our ports, airports, and transportation systems. and delivering clean water and improving our electrical grid. And it's starting to show. So just the same as, when you have a car and you've had it for, 10, 15 years, it starts to get, the mileage starts to show. You got to take it in the shop a little more. Well, sometimes you gotta do a complete overhaul. And that's what Biden's plan is really about. I mean, modernizing 20,000 miles of highway roads and main streets and, improving the worst of the 10,000 smaller bridges and critical linkages to communities across the country. I mean, this is bread and butter. This is about getting to work on time, to ensuring that we create the jobs and on to develop jobs for our manufacturers, which, obviously USW is the largest manufacturing union, wants to do. So, yeah. I mean, we're really excited about his proposals about creating these jobs and focused on union jobs. So,
Absolutely. And in addition, I mean, I think a lot of people, when they think of infrastructure, they do think of some of the things you talked about, right? They think about, oh, we've got to, fix or replace roads that are crumbling, bridges that are falling apart, waterways and other transportation networks. But this plan also includes things that some people don't always consider to be infrastructure. And I wanted you to speak to that. State of the art schools, reliable communication systems, which is internet, upgraded electrical grids, which I think we are seeing again in Texas and we saw once before, expanded access to clean, reliable drinking water, we saw with Flint, robust health care, public health, and much more. Are those, from where you stand, part of infrastructure? Because there are those out there that, feel that perhaps they're casting the net too wide, or, making that umbrella of infrastructure, too big. But to me, these do seem like things that are infrastructure. And just thinking about roads, bridges, and waterways is kind of thinking about infrastructure in the Eisenhower era. And we're not there now. I mean, we certainly have progressed as a nation, as the world has. I consider these things essential to daily life.
absolutely. I mean, when you think about, right now we're having this, as you have your Periscope and your YouTube and the live video feed that's going on right now. Imagine if you're trying to conduct business in a rural part of America, where the difference of your, ability to sell your grain across the globe could mean a faster internet speed. And that's one of those basic broadband things that needs to happen. It's like this idea that our infrastructure is really woven together. It's like a full thread of various concepts. And if you don't, you can have a good base, that's that Eisenhower base of infrastructure. But then once you start to build up and build out and start thinking about where have we advanced since the Eisenhower era? Oh, I don't know. We have a internet. You literally have your almost every American has a phone that's they can carry wherever, and that infrastructure needs constant improvement and upgrading, and that's also the same with our healthcare infrastructure and school infrastructure. When you look at our schools, and I just hate the idea that we just when a school gets too full, instead of having a nice brick and mortar school, they bring in these temporary housing units.
Yeah.
And those don't last very long. Should be able to be upgrading our infrastructure for the long term, and that's really what this Biden plan is really about.
You had touched upon, and the proposal from the president doesn't, he's very explicit in prioritizing not just creating good jobs, but creating union jobs. Now, there are people who are watching or listening that are saying, okay, this guy is, one of the head honchos of the USW. Of course, he's going to like that. He's in and working for a union. But why is prioritizing good union jobs beneficial to all of us, to we the taxpayer?
Yeah, it's such a good question, and it is one of these situations where you have it's a an 18% differential in pay between union and workers. So just your take-home pay is better, and for when we're prioritizing union work as well, it's not just that; it's the ability to control quality and ensure that you have a good quality product. I think that that's something that union work and union labor is often, they go through the training and standards and work through to make sure the project comes out right the first time. And find that with, also basic things like healthcare. Healthcare coverage is union members have 96% healthcare coverage. by their employer, based versus like it's in the low 80s for non-union workers. And that's something that, that's making sure that our employers are responsible for the benefits and the packages, so that we don't have to rely on government on a lot of these things. And I think
who pays for the government, right? And who pays for the government assistance? We, the taxpayers. So basically, you're saying you're offsetting that cost. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to continue to talk more about not only the American Jobs, but talk about Invest in America Act. So much going on coming out of this White House. And we'll also talk about the reality of getting this done and on a bipartisan level. I'm Leslie Marshall. We'll be back with Roy Houseman, Legislative Director for the United Steelworkers. Please follow him on Twitter at Roy Houseman, RYHOUSEMAN, just like you would spell it. And follow the Steelworkers at Steelworkers. And please, during the break, check out their website, usw.org. You can see all the great things they're doing, because much like infrastructure extends to other things you didn't know about, so, by the way, do unions, and so does the USW. I'm Leslie Marshall, back with our guests right after this. Don't go away.
I want to get back to seeing my grandbabies every Sunday and smothering them with big hugs and kisses.
I want to get back to football games with my boys.
I want to get back to feeling and touching, connecting with the people around me.
I want to get back to family dinners and my grandma's mac and cheese.
I want to get back to real grocery shopping. Taking my time, walking down every aisle, smelling the tomatoes and melons, having a free sample or two, or 3.
COVID-19 has changed how we live and how we feel. But now, there are vaccines. And they are the first step that let us get back to feeling optimistic about the days ahead of us. It's okay to have questions.
Is it safe?
Should I get it?
Should I wait?
Now, get the facts. Learn more at getvaccineanswers.org. so you can make an informed decision when vaccines are available to you. Brought to you by the Ad Council.
Hey sis, missed you this morning. Kim told me you weren't feeling well, so I'm just doing a self-care check.
Oh, thank you, friend.
How you doing?
Girl, listen, my energy was so low because I didn't eat breakfast when I got up, so I had to miss virtual yoga with y'all.
Trust me, I understand.
But I'm doing much better now that I've eaten, so I'm back on track.
Great. In that case, let's get some steps in tonight. I'll come over and we can walk around the lake.
Sounds good. Appreciate you being in my business, too. Now, let me get in yours. Did you check your blood pressure today?
I did that and my squats, okay?
Okay.
High blood pressure is not going to be my friend if I can help it. See you at 6?
Let's get it. See you then.
Now more than ever, it's important that we protect our hearts and the hearts of those we love.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1990. About 400 janitors were protesting at Century City, a large office complex in Los Angeles. It was part of SEIU's Justice for Janitors campaign in LA. The janitors had gone out on strike against international service systems. The strike had started on May 30th, and despite promises that they would not interfere with the protest, the LAPD showed up wielding batons. They demanded the janitors immediately vacate the premises. But instead of dispersing, the protesters linked arms, and in a show of solidarity, they marched toward the 150 police dressed in riot gear. Police responded by savagely beating protesters, clubbing people on the ground as they tried to stand back up. One demonstrator, who was 3 months pregnant, suffered a miscarriage caused by the police beating. The media recorded the brutal attack. Coverage spurred outrage at the actions of the police that day. It also made the janitors more determined than ever to win a contract. Public pressure resulted in a new contract with a $2 an hour raise for the janitors. They also won family health care coverage. SEIU filed suit over the police conduct, and 3 years later, the LA City Council awarded the union more than $2.3 million. But the police did not have to admit guilt for the attack. 200 janitors gathered on the steps of City Hall to await the settlement decision. Joel Vasquez, one of the janitors who was beaten on that day, addressed the crowd saying, "The people who are supposed to protect us didn't. They beat us." Today has become a day of commemoration of the janitors' struggle. In 2001, janitors gathered in LA to remember that past victory and rally for economic justice. One marcher carried a sign that read, "What's dignity? New shoes for my daughter, a birthday party for my son." Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Follow Leslie on Twitter. Just go to www.twitter.com/Leslie Marshall, and we'll be sure to share your tweets.
We are back. Happy Tuesday. I'm Leslie Marshall. Hope you're enjoying the sunshine in most parts of the country. Our guest is Roy Houseman, Legislative Director for the United Steelworkers. And like I said, part of the union's legislative and policy department since 2011. I told you about his efforts on steelworkers qualifying for the trade adjustment benefits. Over 10,000 union members across the nation have qualified for work training because of the trade impacts. Good to have him with us. Check out the website for USW, usw.org, and on Twitter, follow them at Steelworkers and follow Roy at Roy Houseman. Roy, thanks for holding. Welcome back. Well, let's move from American Jobs Plan to the Invest in America Act. This is a bill which is a $547 billion package, and it represents a significant increase over the last transportation bill that Congress passed back in 2015. In 2015, those didn't address as many areas that we just talked about and touched upon. They did address roads, bridges, safety, public transit, and more. It would seem to me that, a lot of us will, you get that, tune up for your body once a year with a doctor's appointment. Maybe you get the tune up for the car once a year, or, more than once a year. You go to the dentist once a year. 2015 is the last time that, we did this. Why the lag, or is that typical because the bills do cover usually a certain period of time?
Yeah, so they normally do cover about a 5-year period of time, but unfortunately, much like Congress, much in Congress, they tend to kick the can a few extra years. And last year, they couldn't come to an agreement on an infrastructure package, so they kicked it for a 1-year period of time. So the Invest in America Act is the House Democratic leadership's bill led by Chairman DeFazio in the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, who's a big champion in out of Oregon, a longtime member of in the House of Representatives, who really understands working people and works hard to move forward in a committee that really, can move America. And I think that this broad proposal is something that is really the bread and butter of infrastructure. A lot like we talked about just in the earlier segment. It's quite a bit of that Eisenhower era sort of infrastructure improvements related to roads, bridges, those sorts of infrastructure packages. And that committee went through a marathon markup. 229 amendments submitted by Republicans and Democrats, primarily Republicans, and some of those were policy debates unrelated to transportation, but in some ways to kind of poke at Democrats. So, trying to get at issues related to child labor in electric vehicles, but really done in a way that doesn't actually address the issue and would have banned basically all electric vehicles. So there was these partisan amendments, but at the end of the day, the committee moved forward with 2 Republicans voting in favor of the bill. Representative Fitzpatrick out of Pennsylvania and Representative Gonzalez Colon out of Puerto Rico supported the bill, 2 Republicans out of it. But it is a massive bill. It's going to really kind of kickstart the conversations on infrastructure, and is one of those bills that has to get done because the Highway Trust Fund it expires at the end of the year, or in September, I should say. And when that expires, the gas tax is what is what pays for a lot of this effort, and it would technically expire the gas tax. So this bill is basically that continued reauthorization and spending levels related to it.
When you speak of spending levels, Republicans constantly want to slash the amount of money Democrats are putting up. But when you look at this, like you said, if it's something supposed to be, updated every 5 years, and it hasn't been, since, 2015? Yeah, 2015, yeah. Right? It hasn't been since 2015. Then you need more money. And I know the president wants a bipartisan solution on that. Republican counters to this and everything else Democrats are putting out, especially this, have so far been. Would you say it's fair to say it's inadequate, the amount of money Republicans are countering with for such legislation to address the scope of what our nation needs, especially after such a period of time?
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly right. I mean, you're looking at a situation where, the U.S. has been spending less of its gross domestic product, its overall consumption in the economy. We're the world's largest economy, and we're spending less than 2.5% of our gross domestic product, the overall spending on infrastructure, while China has been spending 8 times that. Yeah. And and part of it is them getting up to speed and kind of bringing themselves to a 21st century economy still. But the other part of it is they're advancing so fast. I mean, you can take high-speed rail now in the equivalent to go from they've laid enough high-speed rail to go to Las Vegas and back 6 times from Washington, D.C.
Wow.
It's
wow.
Wild. Yeah.
You said it. I said, wow. And then I thought about it again when you said it. Wow.
And so when you think about this, and they've made high-speed rail competitive for more or less the distance from Washington, D.C. to Arkansas. And when you realize that that's competitive with airfare, and when you realize that, it's a big deal. It means that they're allowing their citizens and others to move forward and move business in a way that we need to step up and do the same. And that's why when this House panel advanced this $547 billion, it's this is the core investment. This has to be done one way or the other. We hope to see the Biden package, the American Jobs Plan, layered on top of it and move along. But this package in the House is something that just has to be done.
When you talk about China, I just had dinner with a couple of friends, one of which is a Chinese American. Mm-hmm. And she said that after the whole Trump administration with, Kung Flu and that the Chinese are pretty anti-American right now. And so they're probably going to stop buying as much American. And they're very patriotic right now. And they really want their nation to be number one in manufacturing and production. So we as Americans really need to, support making things here and support buying things made here. We forget, our dollar, our choice as consumers is huge in not only, reinvesting in our nation, stimulus-wise financially, reinvesting in our own people, the working class, the majority of our nation, and that is union workers and non-union workers, but especially union workers. You're going to get a better product, because, you got more boxes to, check off. There's a bipartisan group of 10 senators who announced last week that they've reached a tentative deal. What are you guys saying in the back room at the USW? Do you think this can be done on a bipartisan level quickly before the break?
Yeah, sure. I think it can be done. It's going to take some adjustments. That group of 10, I respect it, and I think that they've moved forward pieces. But you have to understand as well, that group of 10 is 5 Democrats and 5 Republicans. And until you get 10 Republicans, we are going to continue down this path of negotiation. Thankfully in the back pocket, we do have this ability to do reconciliation. But reconciliation is in infrastructure somewhat of a blunt tool if you don't get some of these policy upgrades to upgrade towards infrastructure. So
we're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk more about this and how this is a step forward. But we need to talk about money, right? This is what, it boils down to. We need to talk about what that money gets us. What do I get, right? I'm Leslie Marshall. We'll be back with our guest and you right after this. Our guest is the USW's Legislative Director, Roy Houseman. Back with him, back with you right after this. Don't go away.
Hey, Dad. How do airplanes fly? What's in this box? Can I touch this? Where does sand come from? Is this tree good for climbing? What happens if I mix these two things together? How are babies made? What does this thing do?
Kids are curious about everything, including guns. Talking to them about gun safety in your home is a good first step, but you can do more. Always keep your guns locked, unloaded, and stored separately from ammunition. Storing your guns securely is the best way to prevent family fire, including unintentional shootings. For more information on safe gun storage and ways to keep your family safe, visit endfamilyfire.org. That's endfamilyfire.org.
What do we keep in the attic? What's this thing called? Can I ride my bike backwards?
Like I said, kids are curious. It's up to us to keep them safe. Brought to you by End Family Fire, Brady, and the Ad Council.
Right now, our country feels divided, but there's a place where people are coming together.
I gotta tell you, I was nervous to talk to someone so different than me.
Me too, but I'm glad we are.
Love Has No Labels and One Small Step are helping people with different political views, beliefs, and life experiences come together through conversation, and it feels good.
Wow, your story is so...
Interesting?
Yeah.
When people actually sit down, talk, and listen to one another, they can break down boundaries and connect as human beings. At lovehasnolabels.com/onesmallstep, you can listen to amazing, life-changing conversations and find simple tools to start a conversation of your own.
I know one thing. This conversation gives me hope.
It gives me a lot of hope, too.
Take a step toward bringing our country and your community together by having the courage to start a conversation at lovehasnolabels.com/onesmallstep. A message from StoryCorps, Love Has No Labels, and the Ad Council.
Here's a thought-provoking bumper sticker. The system is fixed. We must break it. This thought came into vivid focus recently when a news report by ProPublica revealed that a nest of preening multi-billionaires, led by the likes of Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, and Michael Bloomberg, have been playing America's rigged tax system to dodge paying their share of upkeep for the society that so lavishly enriches them. In a leak of actual IRS data, the 25 richest Americans were exposed for using tricks and loopholes to pay barely 3% of their enormous riches to our public treasury, while ordinary working people shell out about 24% of their meager income. Check out the manipulations by Amazon Hefe Jeff Bezos, the world's richest man. Even as his riches skyrocketed by $120 billion from 2006 to 2018, he paid just 1% in taxes on that huge gain. One year in which his wealth swelled by $18 billion, he even took a $4,000 tax credit from us for the care of his children. The chief fix for these super dodgers is that they can take out loans on the escalating value of their stock, mansions, yachts, etc., without paying taxes on the cash they get. Then they spend the cash value of those assets without having to sell them. Financial voodoo for the privileged few. In response to the revelations in ProPublica's jaw-dropping report, congressional Republicans, Biden administration officials, and the IRS are all promising a thorough investigation and crackdown. Not on the sleazy billionaires, of course, but on ProPublica. This is Jim Hightower saying, yes, some top public officials exclaim that they are outraged. Not by the tax rigging, but by the fact that you and I have been told about it in specific, undeniable detail.
If you miss Leslie on TV this week, catch up at lesliemarshallshow.com.
We are back. I mean, me, Leslie Marshall, and Legislative Director for the United Steelworkers, Roy Houseman. Good to have him with us. Follow him on Twitter at Roy Houseman. Follow the Steelworkers at Steelworkers, and check out their website, USW. We were talking before the break about the Invest in America Act. It is a $547 billion dollar package, representing a significant increase over the last transportation bill. But that last bill passed Congress in 2015, and we should have new ones every 5 years. That's what our guest is saying. Thank you for holding welcome back. Some people say, look, this is a step forward. We have a long way to go. But there's something about when you look at these deals, when you assess these deals, that's important to consider. I want you to maybe talk about and touch upon this. It's not just the amount of overall spending, but the amount of new spending, so that people understand. Because I think most people don't understand when it comes, they just see a price tag and they don't understand the breakdown of this price tag.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I mean, this is a hard part. Is like you think about what your monthly utility costs are, right? And you have your gas bill, your electric bill, and whatnot. And how do we improve those? How do you, some months you use a little bit more, some months you use a little bit less, depending on the weather. Well, with infrastructure is somewhat like this as well in some ways, right? Like some years you've got to really build in and invest and do this deep improvements. And I think, as we were talking about a little bit earlier, like if we aren't making these when we don't make these improvements or improve our ports, improve our infrastructure to get people moving around and goods moving around, other countries are catching up and doing the same. And so you have this opportunity here to where we got to take the day-to-day spending that the Congress already is doing and recognize that we haven't been investing as much as we used to. And if we can upgrade that investment a little bit, and that's where like some of the numbers are really interesting, is that even right now between the House and the Senate had highway bill, just on the surface parts of the bill, like your roads and bridges, they've only got about $343 billion in the Senate package, while there's this $547 billion in the House package. And that's a pretty, you're looking at almost a $200 billion difference. And that $200 billion really does, it's a difference of being able to repair 10,000 bridges and upgrade more highway and do some of the infrastructure pieces like charging stations, like preparing for the future. Like we already are seeing these, the increases of electric vehicles and the infrastructure related to it. Now the question is if the government starts putting money into building this charging infrastructure, we can actually control where that infrastructure comes from, versus as of right now, a lot of this infrastructure, if it's all privately done, it can be sourced from wherever. And
China.
I think that's exactly. That's a prime component. And so when we do talk about these differences in spending, it's about like making those near investments now for long-term gains. Right. And that's, we have to kind of start thinking like that again in this country and not think about next week, but think about what our kids' infrastructure is going to look like. And that's really what a lot of these bills are about.
I want to say you had talked about how the Republicans offered a little more than $300 billion. And there's another thing. I think a lot of people are familiar with, Congress people repurposing money, right?
Mm-hmm.
You take it from column A in the budget, you put it to column B. And I know Republicans want to pay for parts of repurposing money already approved for coronavirus relief. What's the Democrats' take on that? Are they okay with that? I mean, because are Democrats, I guess, more, I am a Democrat, but are Democrats more about, the number, or are they also concerned about where that money comes from? Because money already approved for coronavirus relief, to me, I'd want to touch that too much because we really just don't know what's going to happen in this next year or two with all these variants we're hearing about.
Mm-hmm.
And we're not 100% vaccinated. We haven't reached herd immunity. So anyway, where do Democrats stand on that? Are they like, show me the money, I don't care where it comes from? Or are they kind of like, we want the dollar amount and we want it to be new money? And the reason I say that is the $579 billion, as you know, in that deal, that would include $579 billion in new spending.
So no, that's a really, it's funny. I just retweeted during the break, Invest in America, which is a group that talks about infrastructure in America, and voters basically want to pay for infrastructure investments by taxing corporations rather than repurposing unspent funds by like 56% to 32%. And that's it. That's a key component right there of this idea that like, we can afford this, and we shouldn't start stripping money away from coronavirus. Which can we just take a moment here and just recognize that 600,000 people, Americans, have passed away from the coronavirus. This pandemic is on the tail end, but we should maintain every ability to push forward with those funds and make sure eradicating. I mean, the fact of the matter is only 178 million Americans are vaccinated right now, and we need to do every effort to educate and get people out there and get vaccinated and get those shots in arms. And I think that, this is where, if a little bit of money doesn't get spent right away in the next few months, that money will still be there, and they'll be able to use it for other infrastructure pieces or for in the future. Because you have to remember, when we talk about these bills being every 5 years, there's always an opportunity in Congress to kind of advance the ball a little bit more. And then, so that's just another kind of way of progressing at this. And, it is unfortunate because some of this money that's being saved or not used is really a lot of Republican governors cutting people off of unemployment insurance.
Very true. Very good point. Very true. Yeah.
Really unfair to a lot of people who, no fault of their own, and quite frankly, a pandemic. So I think that it's a situation that, there doesn't need to be a rush. We literally, approved this funding in March of this year, and we'll have some time to reassess and make sure that we can reappropriate those funds in a time that's needed. We can afford to do both. We can walk and chew gum at the same time.
I'm with you there. I'm a multitask maven. I get you. And I would hope our people, our elected officials that tax dollars pay for could and would do the same, and I know they can. And Republicans can do that too.
Yeah.
Speaking of Republicans, when you look at legislation, immigration, huge. They want to break it up into pieces, right? Infrastructure, huge. And some, like Republicans especially, want to do that as well. Can you talk about how Republicans want to parse apart the investments in social and physical infrastructures and why that may not be a good idea and why there's so much pushback from Democrats not to have that parse, not to have that splitting and that?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the current environment, and until 10 Republicans in the Senate decide to start voting, or I should say all 50 Republicans start voting their conscience as opposed to their party line, we could have smaller bills. But until members actually really vote on the issue itself and not on partisan lines, it's going to require larger packages. I mean, if you look back in the last few years, it's those giant bills that are the only ones that are really moving. That is kind of way the DC politics have worked. It doesn't have to be that way, but it means that members need to actually vote towards their goals of improving their lives of their constituents. And I think that that's a key piece here, is that you have a Democratic caucus, and quite frankly, as you've seen, some Democrats have held back on some broader reforms because they think that that's in the best interest of their states. And Republicans, sure aren't shy about holding to their party line and holding to the leadership's line. And I think that we need to work better to move past that. And that's where I like Senator Schumer's China bill, for example, is an example where they were able to break through that. It took a lot of work, and quite frankly, there's some provisions that need to be fixed in the House. But ultimately, we got to keep moving on infrastructure and make sure it's a reality. And I think the idea here is our infrastructure is too important to go small. And I think that's one of the big reasons why we want to kind of move forward.
Something I don't understand when I look at the whole package, to me, I agree, it has to be a whole package. You can't separate social and physical infrastructures because in any piece of legislation, but especially infrastructure, there's kind of two goals, right? Not just catching us up and fixing things and things and making sure we're prepared, whether it's the internet, an electrical grid, or roads and bridges. But aren't we wanting to get the economy back on track? And that's where the financial side comes into play. Can you touch upon that quickly before we go to break? Don't you need both together to get the economy back on track?
When people say supply chain, it isn't just a buzzword. It's like a chain, really. It's about this linkage of what you do, and the linkage between a person laying pavement and being able to ensure that their kids have a good school to go to, and that they have someone to take care of their kids on off hours. So that's a supply chain. That's the linkage. It's really that social and physical infrastructure.
That's actually a great answer, because when people, and it's very simple for people to understand as well, right? They go hand in hand.
Yeah.
Simple economics 101. We'll be back right after this. Don't go away.
What I know about courage, I learned from my adoptive mom. She said sometimes you just gotta hold on and know we'll get through this. Mom, we are so high up. Hold my hand.
No, you hold my hand.
Here we go.
Learn about adopting a teen from foster care. You can't imagine the reward. Visit adoptuskids.org to find out more.
I learned patience from my adoptive dad. All he had to say was,
"Hey, you got this. Just breathe." Hey, we're pretty good.
yeah.
Might have to start a band.
I got it.
Learn about adopting a teen from foster care. You can't imagine the reward. Visit adoptuskids.org to find out more. This message is brought to you by Adopt US Kids, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, and the Ad Council.
COVID-19 has changed how we live and how we feel. We show up differently, worship differently, and have found new ways to express our love and support to family and friends. But now there are vaccines, and they are the first step that lets us get back into the things we miss most, like spreading the word without spreading concern, girls tripping instead of solo sipping, brunching instead of late night munching, and talking smack with a side of mac and cheese. It's okay to have questions about COVID-19 vaccines.
Should I get it?
Should I wait?
Is it safe?
Can I trust it?
What about pre-existing conditions?
Now get the facts. Visit getvaccineanswers.org so you can make an informed decision when COVID-19 vaccines are available to you. Brought to you by the Ad Council.
Welcome to Code WAC, your podcast on America's broken healthcare system and how Medicare for All could help. I'm your host, Brenda Gazar. What aggravates racial inequities in America's healthcare system? To find out, we spoke to Dr. Thomas Rice, a health economist and a distinguished professor in UCLA's Department of Health Policy and Management.
There's so many different ways to measure the performance of health insurance systems, like cost, and that's important for sure, but so is health equity. The U.S. has dramatic inequities in infant mortality rates, depending on race, for example. How might your work inform or promote health policies that center around racial equity?
Well, Brenda, as you know, there are severe racial inequities in health outcomes in the United States, but there are many factors causing this. And I would say that the main ones are a much broader set of societal related factors that go beyond the healthcare system. But the healthcare system is absolutely a culprit here. And I think I'll just focus on one thing that aggravates the problem of racial inequities in the U.S. and that is unique in the U.S. And that's our reliance on making price a barrier for people receiving care. In the U.S., even if you have insurance and about a tenth of the population doesn't, you still face really large cost barriers. And in fact, half of Americans say each year that cost is a barrier and keeping them from getting services that they would like to be getting. Biggest barrier, I think, is deductibles. Deductibles are huge in the U.S., much higher than in other countries.
Get the full Code WAC story on ProgressiveVoices.com and on the PV app. Catch all our episodes by subscribing to Code WAC wherever you find your podcasts. This podcast is powered by Heal California, a nonprofit that uplifts the voices of those fighting for healthcare reform around the country. Until next time, stay healthy.
Follow Leslie on Twitter. Just go to www.twitter.com/Leslie Marshall, and we'll be sure to share your tweets.
Got some new music in the house, Mark American liking it. I'm Leslie Marshall. Roy Houseman's our guest, legislative director for the United Steelworkers. And like I said, before he was in D.C., he worked at the former Smurfit Stone paper mill in Missoula, Montana. He was president of USW Local 885. And he has a master's of public administration from the University of Montana. And he used his trade adjustment assistance benefits. And by the way, his efforts for the steelworkers, well, over 10,000 union members have qualified for the same program that he used, using the trade adjustment benefits, and that's awesome. Check out the website, usw.org. That's for the United Steelworkers. Follow them, the Steelworkers, at Steelworkers, and follow Roy at Roy Houseman, ROY HOUSEMAN. Roy, thanks for holding. Welcome back. We were talking about social and physical infrastructure. Republicans wanted to break it down, talking about needing it together and needing both to help stimulate that economy and to get the economy back on track. Does it give those of you in unions a sigh of relief with a pro-union president in the White House and a Democratic majority in the House, and you have the tiebreaker with a vice president who is a Democrat, obviously, with the 50-50 split in the Senate. Especially when you look at things like with the American Rescue Plan, Democrats passed it through reconciliation to sidestep that obstructionism by Republicans. And, with regard to this as well, you had mentioned earlier, it's imperative that they keep moving. So can an infrastructure bill truly become a reality because a reconciliation, is something that Democrats can use with their current majority? And do they need to use it, with infrastructure quicker to keep moving and to get things, in place, because we have, in a sense, lost over a year financially and in other ways with this COVID pandemic?
This is one of these situations where there's the stick and carrot approach, right? And right now, Biden's really working hard, and I do feel like that there's a good faith effort by all stakeholders in Congress to action. And there's going to be party sides on all of this, but there is the people doing the negotiation, like the Transportation and Infrastructure Chairman Peter DeFazio in the House, and Senator Carper in the Senate, and the EP who heads the Environment and Public Works Committee. They're working with the Republican colleagues to try and build as much of a good faith effort as possible, and try and bring on as many Republicans as possible on their infrastructure. And Biden's doing the same by the negotiations with Shelley Capito, and then now pivoting and working with that group of 10 that we talked about a little bit earlier. At the end of the day, that's the carrots, right? They're bringing them in, they're having conversations, they're going to see if they can find that compromise. But if they can't, they do have in their back pocket a reconciliation bill, and they will move forward with it. And I think that they also have to prove to some of the Democratic senators, quite frankly, that they've made every good faith effort to bring Republicans as close as they can to a deal. And the Democratic caucus is a pretty broad array of people, and they want to make sure that we aren't just bypassing Republicans for no reason. And that is what it is. And in the meantime, we do have this in our back pocket where we can move a second reconciliation package. It only needs 51 votes. And we have to ask ourselves, our infrastructure has been needing repairs for a long time. We've been kind of keeping the wheels on, but the tires are threadbare. And we have to just get in there, and if they need to, they will use that package. But it's a lot better if you can actually change the policies too. It's not just the money. You have to make sure that the policy fits with the times. And that's improving EV infrastructure and ensuring the social infrastructure pieces, and rebuilding schools kind of comes along too. And it's a little harder to do with a reconciliation package is all.
Yeah, no, definitely. I sometimes feel that politicians forget what and who this is about. Yeah. And it really is about the voters, the American people. Are you surprised that there isn't more and quicker agreement with Republicans and Democrats? I say that because whether you're a House member and going back to your district, or you're a senator and you're going back to your state, if you say, look, I helped to create more jobs doing this, that's a win. Infrastructure is a win politically across the board for both Democrats and Republicans. And I always am perplexed at how much foot dragging there is. I understand there were corporations that write checks, through the lobbyist, to the campaigns of these legislators. But at the end of the day, it's going to hurt somebody more politically if that bridge breaks and some of your constituents' family members are on it when it goes down. So do you think that the most important piece of the investment within infrastructure, the American people, is sometimes, and even right now with these negotiations, being forgotten by our politicians?
This is the inherent problem right now, is that when you have kind of this national elections where it's only national issues come up, it does kind of diminish the ability to hold legislators accountable for, the bridges and roads in your own district. And this is why we need to do these sorts of things like rebuilding supply chains and rebuilding that kind of like interconnectivity, so that you feel that you're connected to your community and your neighbors. And it has been hard in this pandemic era, and quite frankly in this current hyper-partisan era here in DC, where it just sometimes it's hard. We're an organization that represents workers, and sometimes it's hard to even get meetings with some of these Republicans, because they've chosen, and their staff and others have chosen to kind of ignore constituencies because they don't think it's politically expedient. And we have to kind of break those down again, and quite frankly, talk about it in more publicly, that it isn't right for Republicans not to meet with labor leaders, and it isn't right for corporations to hold the entire country accountable to a slight increase over their taxes. I mean, and this is what's so scary. I mean, the Biden plan and infrastructure plan was to bring up the corporate tax rate to some historical norm levels. And when you look at that, I mean, that's, he's trying to bring back the revenue to a level that was from like the 60s and 70s, where you had actual corporations paid their fair share, right? Yeah. Related to the American public. And so we have to kind of break that barrier back down again. And we took people to the moon, we can do these things.
Well, also, to your point, we just have been through a pandemic where, the CEOs didn't lose their money, their house. The CEOs didn't have to move because maybe their mortgage was too high in the state that they're in, or maybe they couldn't pay for private school anymore, as some people opt to. And it doesn't have to be some fancy schmancy. Some people would just prefer their kids go to Catholic school, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. As opposed to public school. The CEO always has the luxury of, am I going to have one parent stay home? Or the CEO has the luxury of hiring a tutor to help kids that had such a hard time in school. I mean, the list goes on.
Exactly. Even simple things like broadband. I mean, look at all these kids that couldn't get the schooling they need
Can I tell you something? When I heard the USW, and when I heard Joe Biden and the Democrats, President Biden, talking about broadband being a part of infrastructure after this past year, I was like, absolutely. I can't even tell you, talk about bad luck. Our internet went down, and then there were fires on top of it. Oh, and it was so bad that it got to the point the teachers thought my kids were lying, because the trunk just from the street to my house had been singed based on a fire miles away because of where that trunk originated, but not to my neighbors around me.
Oh, wow.
So you start to think like, wait, do you have internet, Mike? Wait, you do? My kids were going over to neighbors, and it was insane. And the teachers that they're making up, because the school's down the street, and they're like, we don't have that problem. And we're the same distance from that fire you are. And it's like, so when I saw, broadband, as a part of it, really, there's two things here that cannot be disputed, that are needed and that are good, and also good politically, which is what this bill does is it makes our communities safer, and it creates jobs. Make communities safer, create jobs. Who could not like that? Who could, and who would, and why vote against that? I'm going to give you the less than a minute here to wrap up.
Yeah, I mean, following with that, our members actually make the fiber optic cable at Corning facility in North Carolina. And it is one of those situations where we have this opportunity. Like, those guys in North Carolina, they get paid a good wage, and they make thousands of miles of fiber optic cable in a given year. And we have an opportunity to keep them in work and expand those plant jobs with the right bill. And quite frankly, then make sure that people all across the country have the same sort of, like, the New Deal era of, like, everyone having internet just the same as we tried to electrify America in the previous eras, like the New Deal era. So it's all about getting the job done, and we're close. And we just got to keep pressure on Congress, just the good old-fashioned way of calling your legislator and doing the things that you feel is most important to make it happen. So
awesome. Roy, always a pleasure to have you on. I'm glad you joined us today.
Great
Once
to be
again,
on with you.
folks, Roy Houseman from the USW, check out their website, usw.org. Follow them on Twitter at Steelworkers and follow Roy at Roy Houseman, RoyHouseman. Looking forward to having you back, buddy. Have a great rest of the week. And I hope you enjoy the summer weather.
Oh, hope